let's add the delete button and make it work. I'll make a button with a class of remove and a class of button. And I'll just put the word remove in there for now. And if we look at our button styles in the foundation documentation, that was under controls, button, search for colors, coloring. How about this one? Button alert. Make it red. Look dangerous. Remove button alert. Let's watch it show up on the page. Refresh. There it is. Nice and red. Now let's make it work. How do I make something happen when I click something? I want to tell the DOM when some event happens, do a certain thing. That is adding an event listener, right? So we need to tell it to start listening. When should I tell it to start listening for that? In a init? I really want to put it in a init. Why can't I? Why can't I put it in a init? A little, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, init is the first thing, right? So then wouldn't it just start listening for a click, like once you load the page?
We have to tell it what to listen, what element to listen on, right? We have to put something to the left of the dot in that event listener. So what would that be? It needs to be the button, right? The button isn't there. So query selector, if we put, button.remove or whatever in there, that's going to return nothing. So we'd be calling add event listener on nothing. It's not on the page yet. So it needs to already be in the DOM before we can start listening for events on it. Did that happen to trip anybody up? Trying to call add event listener before it even exists? Cool. So we need to make sure it exists first. I heard somebody suggest that we do this in build list item. Or render list item, excuse me. Makes sense. It's part of the list item. All right. So we set the text content. Now we could say item dot query selector, again, to look just inside this one for a button with a class of remove. We're going to add an event listener to that. When what happens? Angie, click, yes. Do what? Some function. We have one called add flick. What if we had one called remove flick? Make sense? Actually give the function a descriptive name so we know what it does when we read this line. We don't have to go look at the definition of remove flick. We know what that method's going to do when we're reading this line. So that would be this dot remove click, right? No parens. It's the actual function, not the return value of the function that we want over here. So let's write that. Add another method down here. Remove flick. Remove click. Remove flick. Remove click doesn't make any sense. Thank you. Going to add my comma. So I know this is a property. First, I'm just going to say console log remove to make sure that I have the event listener wired up correctly. Refresh the page, add a flick, click remove. Yay, remove. It worked. So when I call this, is this in the DOM yet? Is the item in the DOM at this point? When I call add event listener inside render list item? It's not. But it exists. So we can go ahead and do things like add event listeners to it. Won't really help us a whole lot when it's not even in the DOM. But we can totally do that. It needs to exist. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the page yet. That event listener will just be part of that object. All right, now let's make it actually do something. Yep.
How come you don't need like the EV?
We may eventually. I don't have it there yet because I'm not using it yet. As soon as I need to do something with it, I'll put it there. Like, for example, we don't need to prevent default because there is no default behavior for a generic button. It's not inside a form. There's nothing to submit. So I don't need to do that. So I'm only going to add that to the list once I know I need to. Same reason I haven't bound this yet. Because don't need it yet. Might need it pretty soon, but it kind of helps reinforce that you have to do it if I leave it out until the moment that it causes an error. So I need to, let's not worry about the array yet. I need to remove the flick from the page. How do I do that? Who did it? All right. I think I know. Oh man, it's not there. Another Andrew? Yeah. Which one? Rothwell. Mr. Rothwell, what'd you do? No, to remove it from the list, on the page. To remove the list item. Yeah, there is. So what do I call a remove function on? I have to say something.remove, right? What goes to the left of remove? What is it? What? First of all, let's just, yeah, it's the list item that I want to remove, right? So what's inside remove flick? What is it? What is the list item? What's this? So this will be the event target, right? I'm listening for the click on the button, not the list. So the button will probably be the target. Okay, let's try that. This.parent.remove, or parent element. Let's see. JS DOM remove. Child node remove. Oh, I see what you're saying. Child node remove method removes the object from the tree it belongs to. So, are you saying I need to put something in parentheses? What are you saying I need to do? Because this doesn't, this method here, if this is the one we're using, doesn't have any arguments. Let's see what happens if we do this. Refresh. Whackety smackety do. Blah blah blah. Remove. something disappeared, but not the right thing. My HTML doesn't match yours perfectly because I had this span actions in there. And the HTML may change even more. If we were absolutely certain we knew what it was going to look like, we could be really precise. But if there is a way that we can try to make it more flexible, maybe not perfectly flexible, but more flexible, we should try to do that. So what is it we want to do? Like just in English. We know we want to remove the list item. Why do we want to remove the list item? Data-wise, what does the list item represent? It represents the flick, right? Which is why we gave it a class, a flick. Again, we could change the li to be something else, like a div. And we want this to still work. Since we know it has a class of flick, we should try to find it that way. We know how to search within an element for a selector. How can we search its parents for a particular selector? Does anybody know? See what I'm trying to say? So if you think of the structure of the DOM, we know how to look down the tree for something that matches a selector. How can we search up the tree for a selector? That's what we really want to do. Anybody happen to know? Anybody know how to do it with jQuery? It's the opposite of that. So what we want happens to be called closest. That's a jQuery thing. And if we look at that on MDN, we get that same warning that we got on prepend. It's experimental. Let's look at the compatibility table. The compatibility table is quite a bit better for this one. No support on Internet Explorer, but Edge does support it. Safari supports it. Earlier versions of Chrome and Firefox support it. So it's a little better. Mobile, not great, but it's maybe an option. If we do it that way, here's what we could do. So instead of just getting the parent element, we could say closest and pass it, oh my gosh, a selector, like .flick, and try to remove that. See if it works. Seems to. So that's nice and easy. How do we feel about using this to get to the thing? What are the other options? Event.target. Should the day come when we need to bind this to something else in here, this could change. But the event is going to be the event. So it's a little safer, perhaps, unless we're going to call remove some way other than an event listener. But if that happens, let's deal with it then. So I'm going to go ahead and say event.target, closest. If you think it would be clearer what this is, you could say const list item equals event target closest list item remove. If that's easier for you to understand why it works. Yeah, Dom.
Closest immediately start going up the tree, and then after that it will go back down through it, or will it only go up?
Yeah, let's read it. Element closest method returns the closest ancestor of the current element or the current element itself. So it will check the current element before it starts looking up the tree, but it will only go up until it hits document itself. but it will check itself first. We do still need to remove it from the array. So at this point, we've only managed to remove it from the list item. I mean, remove the list item from the list. Yeah. Nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and make a quick commit for this. Remove flicks from the UL, but not the array.